Straight from the man cave, Kinnick Under the Kitchen, authentic, original player artwork is being drawn up for Hawkeye fans everywhere. Locally made prints of stars wearing the black and gold from the past, present, and future. How about current Hawkeye superstars Cooper DeJean and Torrey Taylor? Legends of the past like Jack Campbell, Spencer Lee, and Tim Dwight. Plus future phenoms like Aaron Graves. There are so many options available. They make great gifts, and your purchase benefits the Hawkeye athletes wearing the black and gold. Visit Under the Kitchen on Facebook or at Under the Kitchen's new website. That's underthekitchen.square.site. Again, that's underthekitchen.square.site. Check out Under the Kitchen today and get your authentic, original Hawkeye print. We appreciate Under the Kitchen. Randy Engel has been with us since, almost day one of the content here, the live content here on YouTube. And, of course, such a integral part of our live content is having the expertise of the one and only Coach Don Patterson, who is with us on this final day, this leap year day. What do they call this? They called it Leap Day. Is that what the 29th of February is called, Don, technically?
All I can think of is we can't celebrate this day for another 4 years.
Absolutely.
Enjoy this one.
Do you know anybody that was born on Leap Day?
I don't, but are you aware that John Hayden Fry was born on February 28th?
Okay. I did not know. Well, I did know that because I saw that yesterday. I guess I did know that.
Yesterday, Coach Fry would have been 95 years old.
Wow. 95 years old. So we missed the legendary Coach Hayden Fry. There's no question about it. And Don, it's always good to catch you in the offseason. I know you're busy. You, just like a lot of us, are fully invested in Hawkeye basketball. I know you got season tickets for the women's games. I think we have to address it, even though I know you're not a basketball analyst on here. The announcement that I haven't even had time to publish content on since it came down, the announcement from Caitlyn Clark that she will be foregoing her extra year of eligibility and she'll enter the WNBA draft. I guess just initial reactions. I know this is a football show, but just give me your thoughts on that groundbreaking announcement.
I will admit I was surprised that it was surprised me a little. The big on Sunday, the announcement might be made. Answer the game. I understand there's really not much left for her to do in college. The one thing, of course, that we haven't been able to do is become a Final Four team and win both those games. Maybe that'll happen this year. I certainly hope so. It's safe to say with our seniors, and Caitlyn's just one of them, of course, they're going to be highly motivated to go out in a blaze of glory. And I don't know if they can pull it off, but I wouldn't bet against them either, because they understand the beauty of basketball. In my mind, if you're not so good in December or even January, that's okay. You just got to be good in March. And some teams, of course, are peaking right now. Other teams seem to be flaming out a little bit. So we'll see which category both of our teams are in. With a little bit of luck, they'll both give a really good account of themselves in the conference tournament that are coming up. And then, of course, even more importantly, the NCAAs.
You're not by nature, well, I shouldn't say this because I don't know, but you don't seem to be a quote unquote emotional guy.
I'm more analytic.
You're more of an analytic, and that's some of that's just I want to make this about gender, but some of that's just the male way of thinking, right? Like I'm the same way, but I think all of us, but I don't know. I'm just thinking about the career that Caitlyn has left here and knowing now that these are her final few games, it does kind of get you not emotional per se. I'm sure some people are emotional about it, but this is a once in a lifetime type of talent. We've never seen anything like this at Iowa. It's incredible. And so I just hope people appreciate this. And I think the one takeaway I had when the announcement initially broke and she released this on social media, first of all, I think it was cool that she was able to announce it and it didn't get leaked by someone in the media. My one reaction was she wants senior day to feel like senior day. She wants everybody to know this is senior day, and it's not just going to be senior day for her, but a number of these players who have been around this program for several years. But just cannot imagine what that crowd will be like on Sunday against Ohio, against a really good Ohio State team.
Yes, we definitely have our hands full. I think it's going to be a great game. And it's unfortunate, as you know, Ohio State's already celebrated the fact that they won the regular season title. But that's okay. There's still a lot riding on the game. Obviously, we have a chance to be a 1 seed, especially if we can knock off Ohio State, and then have a good tournament, a good Big Ten tournament, I should say. That should give us a great chance to become a number 1 seed. If we end up as a 2, that's fine. That's all well and good. What I would not want to do is end up as a 4. 3 plays 2, obviously. If it all goes according to schedule, 3 plays 2, and 4, of course, has to play 1. So I'm confident we're not going to be a 4. We'd have to really, really struggle down the stretch here for us to fall all the way to a 4. And when I say a 4, of course, I mean one of the 4 number 4 seeds in the tournament.
How do you think her game will translate to the next level?
You know, I hate to beg off of a good answer, but I simply haven't seen that much WNBA. I'm not sure, but I have to believe it's going to travel well. You know, think of it this way, Corey. This is an amazing statistic if you think about it. At least in the modern history of women's basketball, only one player has finished in the top 25 in both scoring and assists. Caitlyn's not only in the top 25, she's number 1 on one list and number 6 on the other. Isn't that incredible that nobody else has been in the top 25 in both categories? So that says so much about how well she can share the ball. She's not just a scorer. She's also a passer. And I even had the privilege of telling her dad, if Caitlyn would have been born as a son to you, no doubt in my mind, he would have been a great quarterback. Because Caitlyn understands spatial awareness. You've heard me say that before. Let's face it, hitting Hannah or Kate in particular, or maybe Molly, streaking down the court on a fast break is not much different than going play action wide middle to a tight end behind the linebacker. Very similar. You got to be able to touch the ball over the linebacker if you have to, and still be sure you don't leave it in the air too long, because at that point, of course, the safeties are going to light up your tight end. So the same thing really applies in basketball.
She has changed the game of college basketball, women's college basketball, and I have no doubt she's going to change the WNBA. I don't know how her range, her ability to handle, her vision doesn't translate over. I just cannot imagine it not. So, you know, like there are examples on the men's side of players that never really transitioned well to the NBA. One name that comes to mind is Jimmer Fredette, but Caitlyn is a lot more complete in her own right than Jimmer Fredette ever was on the men's side. So let's just make that clear.
Yeah, and, I agree.
You know, he was really good. He had great range. I could score it, but she just, again, all those things I just mentioned, her vision, her ability to get her teammates involved, score at any level. She's obviously an excellent free throw shooter. And just her swagger, her attitude, I think is going to be a breath of fresh air for a league that needs help. I don't think there's any question the WNBA needs help. That's been well documented. And congratulations to Caitlyn on a big decision. I'm disappointed. I mean, I was hoping she'd come back for another year. I'm happy to announce that. But I'm just happy. Fans ought to be happy that they got her for 4 years, because if this was set up any differently, Don, usually a talent like this at any institution for a major sport, you're not going to get 4 years out of them, because you're either going nowadays you're going to have somebody poach them, somebody that can offer them more money, or, you know, pro opportunities come calling and they leave after, you know, 2 or 3 years. And it's just not the way college women's basketball is set up.
You know, the other reason I think that Caitlyn's going to be so good for the WNBA is simply because she's a wonderful person. And I don't doubt, you know, if they have part of the problem is with public relations, of course, or with image. And Caitlyn's going to only enhance that image simply because she knows how to treat people, knows how to interact with children as well as adults. And in that regard, she'll be a great spokesman to represent, I should say spokesperson, to represent the league.
Absolutely. So congratulations to Caitlyn Clark. I will publish some content here on the channel. I'll probably cut this segment out and throw it up there just so we have something up there after this show goes final. But Don, I appreciate you taking the time this evening. We're here to talk football. I know we're a few weeks away from the start of spring practice, But we did have some news here a couple of weeks ago with John Budmayr officially being named Iowa's wide receivers coach. So I want that to kind of be the meat of at least the first half of our show. And the call line is open. So if people want to talk to Coach Patterson, by all means, give us a call. You can also throw up your comments in the chat. We've got about 120 people on right now. Be sure to share the show out on social media. I know it's kind of an odd time for a football show. I know there's plenty of college basketball going on tonight, and it's a night off for a lot of Hawkeye fans that have been taking in Hawkeye content almost every night with the men and the women here rounding into form as we head to March. But Don, we had Tom Kakert of HawkeyeReport.com on a show about a month ago or so after Tim Lester was hired. And we had asked him the question, hey, Tom, who do you think is going to be the next wide receivers coach? And he thought at the time that it was going to be John Budmayr. He was correct. And John Budmayr was announced just a couple weeks later. You and I have both expressed some level of concern. In fact, I've got a video that's scheduled to go up on my channel here probably in the next few minutes, actually, on just natural concerns that I have regarding this hire. And I'll just run through them real quickly for you, Don, and then you give me your feedback and see if there's some of the same concerns you have, or maybe you can alleviate some of my concerns. The first one that I brought up was recruiting. This is a position where Iowa's really struggled to recruit really athletic skill position players. And it hasn't just been a wide receiver. They've struggled recruiting quarterbacks, or at least you could say recruiting and developing quarterbacks. Has it been more of a recruiting issue, more of a development issue? Apples to oranges, maybe, but certainly recruiting has been part of the problem for wide receivers. They've had a lot of misses out there, even of some legacy guys. A guy like Kyler Casper was a guy, boy, you'd love to get Kyler Casper. Don, you knew Kyler's dad. He coached his dad, Kevin, huge Hawkeye fan. And if Iowa was any more attractive for a wide receiver, I think they would have landed Kyler because, just the connection there and how strong of a fan Kevin is of the Hawks. He ends up going to Oregon, not playing a whole lot out there, but he's an example. And Iowa swung and missed on a lot of guys. Oliver Martin, and eventually transferred to Iowa, but they were unable to land him at a high school. He's a 4-star kid out of Iowa City. So the point is, recruiting has been an issue. I just wonder, John Budmayr being a Midwest native, he's coached at Wisconsin. He was at Colorado State for a year. He's been at Iowa coaching. He's a special assistant to the head coach these last couple seasons, but he's been the de facto quarterbacks coach, working with the QBs for the last couple of years. That's been well documented. Just what kind of footprint is he going to bring for recruiting? Is he going to be able to help them in some of the more talent-filled states, especially at a position where they've already got a barrier and a kind of a stigma on the program? I just wonder, is he going to be able to relate to some of the kids in different parts of the country that Iowa needs to be able to, they've done well with, for instance, running back and Ladell Betts. What he's given them down in some of those Southeast states has been pivotal. And Kelton Copeland we were told a long time ago, Kelton was really going to help him down in Florida. He got a couple of guys down there, but boy, he struggled to recruit players. There's no question about it. So that'd be my first big concern. My second concern, Don, is experience, not just experience as a player or lack thereof. John Budmayr has never coached wide receivers that I'm aware of. He's a former quarterback, so that's better than switching from one side of the ball to the other, I'd have to think. But he's never coached the position, and so that's a concern. I guess let's just take those first two, Don, to start. Can you provide any clarification on where you stand on either one of those concerns? Are they warranted, or can you alleviate those worries?
Well, you heard me in support of the fact that Tim Lester is a good hire. We need to give Tim a chance to prove that he's more than capable of being an outstanding offensive coordinator. And as you recall, Corey, I had several good friends that had a lot of history with Tim Lester, and all those reports were very positive. So that's a good sign that Tim's going to be more than capable of doing a great job for us. That last show you were talking about a month ago or so, I do remember that I couldn't hide the fact that I would have some concerns if we were in-house with our new quarterback coach. I'm sorry, with our new receiver coach. And here we are with John. I've gotten to know John a little bit through all these practices that I've had a chance to see. And I don't think there's any doubt he's an outstanding person. He knows how to treat young men the right way. I don't doubt that he's going to be a good motivator of his players. But the reality, when it gets into recruiting, you mentioned recruiting. Let's face it, if you're an 18-year-old or a 17-year-old, so often nowadays he's only 17 because maybe it's his junior year rather than his senior year. And they're very impressionable. And they're hearing from people all over the place, receiver coaches from all over the place. And logically, they might have an initial attraction to a receiver coach that happened to be a great receiver. It often happens that way. For that matter, it's pretty common at all positions that the best position you can coach is probably the same one you played. That would only make sense. John clearly wasn't a receiver. He was a quarterback, and those positions at least relate to each other a lot. But I will admit, part of recruiting, of course, is making a great first impression. And it's easier to do that if you have some kind of notoriety as a former player at that same position. John won't have that advantage. He'll have to overcome that. It can be done, but it's not going to happen overnight, that's for sure. So that is a concern. You know, John needs to get a lot of mileage out of the guys that we have on the team right now. And obviously, as those guys impress others with how they can play, some of that credit belongs with the position coach too. So with just a little bit of luck, we'll see better play out of these receivers this fall than what we've seen. And it will be an easy sell, hopefully at some point, an easy sell to recruits that John can elevate their game just like he did some players that he inherited while he made his first move as a receiver coach. That's what we have to hope to happen. I've lost you, Corey. I can't hear you.
Don, hope is one thing, but that leads me into my final concern, and that is as it relates to performance thus far as part of the Iowa staff. I have no doubt what you're saying is true, that he's a tremendous person. He married into a really good family, a family you're very familiar with, the Hartliebs. And I've heard nothing but great things about John Budmayr as a person and as a coach. However, resume and performance does mean something. It means a lot. And it's been well documented. He's been working with these quarterbacks. He's a former quarterback. Brian Ferentz was not a quarterback. So these past couple of years, John has been working with the quarterbacks a lot.
Right.
Spencer Petras got 1 year with him. So I understand it's a small sample size. I did not see any improvement from Spencer Petras his senior year, not any substantial improvement. Obviously, they struggled at quarterback this year. Now, I also think Deacon Hill was put into an unfair position. However, with that being said, I did not see anything that would indicate to me that John has really elevated that room since he's been here. And that would be my one concern. I know he's not coaching quarterbacks, but you know, you promote a guy, usually it's because he's just excelled at what he's been doing at his given position. And I don't know that I've seen the results on the field. Obviously, Kirk feels differently, but just talk about the influence or lack thereof he's had on the quarterback room.
Well, the example I cited a month ago, I simply recalled what Coach Fry used to say, and he would tell us from time to time, he would remind us of this, the fact that you may be a Division I college football coach in the Big Ten, no less, but you still never need to lose sight of the fact that you're a teacher. You're a glorified teacher. That's what you are. Your job is not to teach anything in academia. Your job is to teach a young man how to play that position that he happens to play better than anyone could expect or imagine. And Coach Fry would remind us, if you're not doing a good job of teaching your players, then I'm going to have to look for another teacher at some point. Nothing personal, but I expect a great performance out of all of you. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to achieve our team goals. And the example you brought up is fair, I would say. The question that one would ask, of course, is how effective was John as a teacher of our quarterbacks this year? And to be kind, the results have not been great. We needed Deacon to improve a lot and improve in a hurry. And a lot of that responsibility lies with Deacon to be able to get that done. But I'm sure that John would be the first to say that responsibility is on me too. And the results, to be kind, were mixed. How's that?
I think that's being kind. I don't, we're talking about as far as quarterback performance. And again, I understand Cade went down. We're talking about some of the worst numbers, not only in the Big Ten, but in all of the FBS from a passing standpoint and a lot of different categories. We don't need to run through all the gamut of categories that we're looking at there when we say that. But, I think that'd be the one concern. Now, I'm sure there are examples of former quarterbacks who have coached receivers and done so admirably. Don, can you think of any specifics that you can share?
Well, I will admit, when Bill Snyder left, Coach Fry came in the next day. Bill asked me to go with him to Kansas State, and I said, Bill, I'll go unless Coach Fry gives me your old responsibilities. The next day, Coach Fry said, Donnie, I don't have to think about this. I want you to coach quarterbacks and receivers. And at that point, of course, I called Bill and indicated to Bill I wasn't coming. It meant a lot to me that Coach Fry had that kind of confidence in me that I could do that. I'm not a former receiver either. I was a quarterback. I was a defensive back. So I have an idea, of course, of how to defend against wide receivers. And I have an idea of how to throw the ball to wide receivers, but I never played the position. I had good friends that did, of course. We talked all the time about what needed to be done to be able to fine-tune our own passing offense back in the day. So I do think that John has an idea, of course, of what a receiver should be doing at any particular moment in the play. And it is important that the quarterback coach and the receiver coach be on the same page. That's why it always made sense years ago when we only had 9 full-time assistants rather than 8. Typically, the offensive coordinator often did coach both quarterbacks and receivers. Bill Snyder did it. When Bill left, I did it. It worked just fine. They were all in the room together. Makes sense because they need to be on the same page anyway. So there's no doubt that Tim Lester and John Budmayr are going to be working side by side going forward because they need to be sure that they're talking to their players exactly as the other coach expects that they would talk to their players about particular plays and how to run routes and where the ball belongs and all those sort of things.
Joe in the chat says, talking about Deacon Hill, Budmayr, and Clark leaving is a low point in my Iowa fandom. How depressing. And he adds, how can anyone talk about Deacon Hill today? I'm out. See you later, Joe. No one's forcing you to be here. Anyways, South Bend Hawkeye wants to know, there's a little bit of cynicism in this question, so let's just be aware of that here. And South Bend is known for kind of being a cynic on here. He says, does Kirk ever give inspiration to you? We all love Hayden, don't get me wrong. I feel like Kirk is not living up to the standard Hayden set. Don, is there, and I know this is more of a personal question, and I don't want to make this personal, but there are some people that feel like as a coach gets older, right, gets closer to retirement, they lose motivation to do greatness, to complete greatness, to achieve greatness. Is there any truth to that? Do guys get satisfied when you were late in your career at Western Illinois and then you moved on to UConn and to Buffalo? Were you ever satisfied, and was there ever a sense of complacency, or did you still shoot for the stars, so to speak, with your job?
Well, the mindset for me, I recognized I was lucky enough to coach for 37 years, but I knew as I got into my 60s, nobody has to keep me around, and for that reason, I better be sure to not disappoint my boss in any way, shape, or form. So you always have the mindset, if I'm going to go out, I'm going to try to go out on a positive note, and try to be sure that the last year's not a bad year, that sort of thing. That is important to be able to get that done. We did have a bowl season in year 3 at UConn. It was important that we get that done, and we did. And that was my last year of coaching. The only regret I have about UConn and Buffalo, my 400th game in coaching was our bowl game, our last bowl game at Buffalo, and we lost. And then my 425th game was the last game I ever coached at UConn, and we lost that bowl game too. But as you've heard people say, there are really no losers in bowl games. Not really, as long as you perform competitively. If you lay an egg, a different story. Of course, you feel like all is lost if you have a poor showing. But thankfully, both those games were hard-fought games. We just happened to be on the short end of the scoreboard.
Are you saying that you're in favor of bowl participation awards? Should we be hanging banners for bowl participation, Don?
No. No, with 40-something bowl games, I don't think that's necessary anymore. If you're playing on January 1st, that's a big deal. But if you're playing on December 23rd, not so much.
Wayfarer of the Wilderness, Coach Patterson, impromptu episode of Hawkeye Hangout for the offseason. Awesome. We are super lucky to have this man's time. Very grateful, Don. Thank you. Much love from Charlotte. Appreciate that.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Esther wants to know how you're doing. Were you under the weather recently? I don't remember this.
I was a little bit under the weather for a while, but nothing but I guess the flu. I know it was not COVID because we tested, but I did get a bug. My sister-in-law, Lisa's only sister, came up from Texas, and I think over the holidays, and I think we managed to get a flu bug from her, I think. And of course, this winter weather doesn't help. I did make the mistake going to a game in Carver Hawkeye. I was dressed a little bit too lightly on one of those cold nights, and that gave me a cold also. So I think I've had a combination of the flu and a cold at different times, but I'm fine now. I'm recovering as well as any old man can.
Don, did I send you the picture when I was at the Iowa-Ohio State men's game, right?
Okay.
And somebody texted me and said, "Hey, I see Coach Patterson in the section down in front of me to the left." And so I knew where my buddy was sitting. So what I did is I took my other buddy's new Android camera, and these I'm not gonna. Samsung is not promoting anything on the show, but these cameras are insane. So I was on the opposite side of the arena. I was able to zoom in, and I took a picture of you sitting there, and it was
I've seen that.
Unbelievably clear. It was unbelievably clear. So I found you in an arena of 15,000 plus, and
would it be wrong to ask for a copy? Because if it's a good picture, it might be one of the few I've ever taken.
No, it wasn't that clear. I'll send it to you, but it's pretty incredible. So I did see you at that game. But I know you've been at Carver a lot this year, so I know that means a lot to the athletic department to see one of their own supporting athletics still after retirement. Destiny Pirate, this is kind of a question back to what we led with, the whole Caitlyn Clark news. Will we ever see a phenomenon like Caitlyn Clark again? Certainly basketball, football, hard to imagine anybody as, I don't want to say polarizing, but as instrumental in just affecting the game as a whole. I mean, frankly, you can say this is hyperbole, but I think Caitlyn is right up there with the likes of how Steph Curry affected the NBA, 10, 15, 20 years ago, whenever that was. He hasn't been in the league that long, but no, it's something that people I hope will enjoy. And again, Sunday will be such a special day. Okay, couple things here before we continue on this. Let's see, this John Budmayr kick, and I have some follow-up questions. Esther wants to know, with Tim Lester being the new OC, do you think people, I'm assuming she's talking about the outside narrative, will think more highly of Iowa? Will Iowa get more respect now or less respect on with the Tim Lester hire?
I think the people that are not fanatical fans, they'll probably have a wait-and-see approach. Let's see if Iowa's any better. They're probably skeptical that Tim can work miracles with the Iowa offense. A detractor would say, well, it's a lot of the same players, so good luck getting a lot more mileage out of them than what you were able to get last year. But those same players, of course, they're not happy with the way their performance went last fall, so they're determined to improve a lot from one year to the next. We are a developmental program, as you know, Corey, and those guys are working hard to try to improve who they are. And that'll give Tim maybe a little better chance with some of those same players that are a year older, a year more mature. In that regard, Tim might have a better chance of getting a lot of mileage out of them than Brian did a year ago.
Let's go to our first caller of the day. Our phone line is open, 515-635-1601. The number is across the bottom of your screen, or you can log on to StreamYard to ask Coach Patterson or I a question. We've got one of our regulars here. James is with us. James, welcome.
Oh, first, my bad. Let me get ready. I didn't know I was first. I was waiting. But
You're
first
first.
off, Coach Patterson, it's good to see you. I'm gonna stick with the wide receiver
To
talk a
you,
little
James.
bit. First off, you kind of look at recruiting. I think last year, the 2023 class, I think was like one of their better ones they've had in a while. But I feel like other than that, they really haven't recruited well. I mean, just with what they got. They got more depth than they usually do. They got like 3 wide receivers. Usually they only get 1 or 2. I mean, Moda, Howard, and then I don't know if they're better because we haven't seen them play, but in
Just
like
well, hold on a
depth
second.
wise.
Hold on. Let me just quantify what you just said, James. And I am a big fan of all 3 of those young men that you just mentioned. I think they're all well spoken. Have interviewed every one of those 3 receivers you just brought up. You're talking about Dayton Howard, Jarrett Bowie, Alex Moda. Jarrett Bowie had very few other offers. He was a 3-star kid out of high school that committed to Iowa late in the process. Alex Moda is an Eastern Iowa kid, converted quarterback. I hope he works out as well. Got good speed. Dayton Howard, 6'5", big body, did not have a single offer. You know that, James. Not
Yeah.
a single offer from anyone. Not
Yeah.
another D1 school, not a D2 school, NAIA. I mean, Kyle Spence had more offers out of high school to play football than Dayton Howard. I'm joking, of course. But my point is, James, let's just quantify what you're saying a little bit. That class.
I meant better class in depth wise, where it's like, yeah, they might not be good, but they got 3 guys, and obviously you might have a chance of if the more you, and I know this is gonna sound cliche, but the more guys you get, the more chance you have of hitting on them. What I mean by that too is if you get 1 guy, that your chance of hitting is very.
Well, you have to have a certain number of players in the room, right,
Yeah,
John?
but you look at what they've recruited the last couple of years, they
Right.
haven't really recruited that well. It seems like a lot of our wide receivers have been walk-ons lately. Like obviously, we had injuries the last couple of years, but we've had to play Wick. We've had to rely on guys like that. So I feel like the more depth you can get, maybe you have a chance of hitting on one of them.
Let me give you credit for something you just said, James, because I think you're absolutely right. I do think, to some extent, the walk-ons that have played, and you mentioned Alec Wick, Jack Johnson played a little bit before being busted for the gambling stuff. Jackson Ritter's a guy as a former walk-on has played some. Caden Weegan, Nick Easley, go down the list. But Don, at some point, if that's a continuous, like it's great to see walk-ons have success stories, but I would think if you're continuing to have to rely on walk-ons, especially at skill position spots like receiver, that's an indication that you are not either A, landing the best athletes, or B, developing them.
You might say that, yeah. There are guys that are overlooked, but not that many typically. Kevin Casper's an example. We were able to to recruit Kevin as a walk-on. I was surprised he wasn't scholarshiped. I had a lot of confidence when we encouraged him to come. A lot of confidence that he would earn a scholarship, and he only earned one. He's probably still one of the all-time leading receivers, I guess, in Iowa history. So good things can come out of guys that start off without a scholarship. I like Alec Wick. I saw him play as a high school player at Regina, and I think he has a chance to develop. But when I say develop, it's a little bit of a reach to say you see him as a difference maker, a guy that's going to be first team all conference in another year or 2. Is that possible? Yeah, it's possible, but it's not likely. My hope for Alec is that he can, first and foremost, prove himself as a reliable player to be able to go out on the field and make plays for us and move the ball, catch everything he touches, run precise routes, tap out on his ability as best he can. But the fact that I'll say it this way, there are 5-stars that flame out when they go to college, and there are 3-star guys that end up being all conference. But in general, those stars do mean something. Ohio State has a lot of 4 and 5-star players, as does Michigan. And it gives them a little better chance to earn ultimate honors, All-American honors, all-conference honors, that sort of thing.
Yeah, the one reason I kind of was hitting wide receiver is not just the Budmayr situation. I feel like that's obviously the position that scares you the most because obviously you know who your top 2 are with Caleb and Seth. But like after that, if Seth goes down or something like that, it's scary because you don't know what you have after that, right? Or you don't know if you really can go 3 deep like that because Bostic wasn't healthy at all last year. I mean, he played a little bit, but he wasn't healthy. He was very banged up, up and down with
He
injuries.
didn't look great when he came back.
Yeah, for sure. And then obviously, like you said, Alec Wick, but he's a walker, and you never know what you can get from him. It's just like, to me, it's scary because I feel like we only have 2 reliable guys, and I don't even know if they're reliable, really. I think Caleb is. That sometimes his hands are hit or miss, but
But
even
here's
Caleb's hands are hit or miss sometimes too. But
here's an early prediction: Caleb Brown will be a starter. I don't think that's going to surprise anybody. Seth Anderson will be a starter, and then I think that third spot is completely up for grabs. Like I don't think that, and I'm not saying you're saying this, James, but I don't think it's Alec Wicks to lose or Jacob Bostic to lose. I think you could see anybody and everybody compete for that spot. And maybe it's somebody that we're not talking about. Maybe
even Wedgen, because I feel like Wedgen played a little bit last year too, so you might see a chance. The only thing that worries me about him is they ran a lot of just jet sweeps like the first 2 weeks with him, and they just went away with it because we did whatever we could with him. And that's what it seemed like, at least last year. Is they just ran a couple jet sweeps with him in 2 games, and then they're like, oh well, that's all we really got for him, and they ain't using the rest of the year. That makes sense.
Here's what I would watch for, James. I think Iowa's going to go to the portal after the spring period. Now, how many scholarships will they have to work with? They don't have any to work with right now. They got to lose people to get back below the 85 scholarship limit. But I would not be surprised to see them go back to the portal again now that they have John Budmayr, new wide receivers coach, and see if they can work the portal a little bit. Don, I wouldn't be shocked if I don't have any inside information on this, but I've been saying this for a while. I wouldn't be shocked to see Kyler Casper end up in the portal at some point because he really hasn't taken to Oregon. If that were to happen, maybe you make a push for a kid like that and you get your prototypical X receiver to complement, Caleb and Seth. I don't know. I'm just spitballing this, but I agree with what you said, James. They have more depth. It's scholarship depth, but just a lot of unproven commodities. And so that's a heavy it's one thing to move like people who compare Abdul Hodge coaching tight ends to John Budmayr coaching receivers. I think that's ridiculous because Abdul Hodge took over a really, really good, solid, stable tight end room. John Budmayr has taken over a mess. He's taken over a mess. Call it what you want. He's taken over a mess.
Hodge Abdul also had proven leaders like Laporta and even Lachey, like proven guys who know what they're doing. There's not a proven guy in that room for Budmayr really, I feel like, to lean on, if that makes sense. And we don't know how much of a leader Caleb Brown is. We don't see him on a daily basis, obviously, like they do. So we don't know how much of a leader he is. And I don't know if they really have that vocal leader in that room. And I think that's kind of scary too. And I was looking at recruiting. It just seems like we don't recruit. Like the top Iowa recruits are not even for wide receivers, not even really an option for Iowa. Looks like this year so far. And I know it's early still in 2025, but it's just weird how it's working out. I feel like it just seems like we're just getting pushed out kind of in the state. Like wide receivers from the state of Iowa are kind of looking at it too the same way as I think some fans are. Was just like, oh, I don't want to go there. I'm not even interested.
Well, Reese Vanderzee, how high was Reese Vanderzee on the list? He's another guy that
he's tall. Obviously, he has tall. But I'm talking about like this next year too with like Xavier Robinson. I know he's announcing here soon, and then obviously Malachi Kirby is going to Kansas. So for that, it's just like sometimes you have to worry about the in-state guys a little bit too. But
well, I will say this, and Don, if you have any insight, I know you're not some recruiting guru now, but I think as it relates to that position specifically, wide receiver, traditionally that's a position where you got to be able to go somewhere else. You got to be able to go to the four corners of the earth, so to speak, Don, to recruit effectively.
But I'm saying if you can't get guys from your own state though to look at you.
Well, they are getting guys from their own state. They've got Reese Vanderzee, they got Alex Moda in these last 2 classes. That's what I'm saying. You mentioned a couple of the Kirby kids going to Kansas, but in general, the state of Iowa just does not produce a ton of.
I don't disagree. I don't disagree with you on that one. I don't disagree with you on that one.
Thing Oliver Martin at a high school was perceived to be a high-end receiver, and that was a huge miss. You can't lose a kid like that out of your backyard.
Luckily for us, he really didn't do much in general everywhere he went. And I know he played at 3 schools, so that could also be part of it. Sometimes you can transfer 3 times. It affects a little bit what you do too. But he also wasn't that great for being as highly recruited as he was, if that makes, or high star as he was, if that makes sense.
Anything to add, Don?
No, I think that's a true statement. I would just say this, that we need to think a little bit outside the box with who we recruit. And by that, you heard me say before, Corey, I hope we don't decide that everybody has to be 6'2" to play receiver, because there's nothing wrong with a guy that's a little bit on the short side as long as he is explosive speed. Just think back to Tim Dwight, Damon Gibson, the guy that played for Purdue, whatever his name was, that's playing for the Cardinals now, I think. How about Tyreek Hill? Yeah. You know, those guys are all undersized, and yet they can pass level. So it's okay. And he doesn't have to be a high school receiver. Maybe he is a high school running back. So we just need to be able to think outside the box and expand our recruiting base a little bit as it relates to receiver.
And I sure hope, here's what I hope, Don. I think the best case scenario, and you tell me if I'm wrong, you're a former coach, I'm not. Best case scenario is Tim and John sit down and figure out the best way to fix this problem. Like, Tim has got to be a part of that solution. It's not just John Budmayr fixing the wide receiver room. It's a problem that goes far beyond that. And I hope with some of the little intricacies that we expect to see with the Tim Lester run offense, that they can figure out a way to get creative. Maybe it's a Terrell Washington. You know, they're loaded at running back this spring. He's a guy who's been talked about. Hey, maybe he can.
Didn't he play some receiver in high school too? I think Terrell played a little bit of wide receiver in high school too. I think he kind of.
Yeah, well, you've heard me say this, Corey. One of the things we need to think about doing to make us more difficult to defend, you've heard me talk about multiple formations with the same personnel groupings. So let's just talk about 21 personnel. You know, that's not a good example. Maybe 11's a better example. 11 personnel, one back, one tight end, right? Okay, that can work. But how about out of 21 personnel, how about playing one back from a 21 personnel grouping? In other words, having a running back that can motion out of the backfield or jump out of the backfield to line up as an inside or outside receiver. Ronnie Harmon did it as a freshman here years ago. We've had other guys that did it. Tavian Banks did it. Mike Saunders did it, to name a couple of guys. So if you do have an undersized running back that has good receiver skills, for God's sakes, don't be afraid to line him up as a receiver and let him play. So maybe Washington is that guy. He certainly appears like he has that capability.
And I'll get off, but I have one more question while I get off. I have to listen to the question. But I think somebody said in the chat too, how would you do it, Don, with Cade not practicing? Would you do 50-50 or would you go all Marco for the quarterback? Because obviously Cade's not probably going to practice at all in the spring.
Well, I've stated it before, and I still feel this way. If Cade's not going to have any live reps this spring, nothing against Deacon, but I would simply declare Marco will take snaps with the ones. That's how we're going to start the spring. And Deacon, you'll be taking snaps with the twos. And I don't expect that you'll like that decree. That's what I plan to do. You don't have to like that, but the challenge for you is to prove me wrong. I'll give you every opportunity to prove me wrong. Just because it starts that way doesn't mean it finishes that way. You have to have the mindset, I'll show him. I've always said, even as a head coach, I wish I had $1 every time a player came to me and said, Coach, I think you have a great appreciation for what I can do, but my position coach doesn't feel as strongly about me as you do, I feel. And I would typically say, well, Joe, I think you're wrong in that regard. Your receiver coach likes you a lot. He simply has to admit that you haven't done enough to prove that you deserve to be higher on the depth chart. So the burden's on you. Don't think for a second that he's being unfair to you, because I'm here to tell you, you should be second team right now. The other guy's better. He's more reliable than you. And you can have the attitude that you're a victim, but you're not. You're simply a guy that's not quite as good as the other guy. And that's okay. You don't have to be better. But I would like to believe you're going to be determined to show us that you're better. And if you can do that, then I will promise you're going to play more than the next guy. I always like to tell our guys, the best guy will play the most, and the second best guy will play, but obviously in spotting the starter. And if you're not happy with your playing time, then it behooves you to do something about it. Prove me wrong. I'll give you every opportunity to do it. And And you've heard me say before, Corey, if there's a lot of doubt between two players, then the solution then is to go equal opportunity with equal reps against equal opposition to split the reps. That's the best way to find out, is they're both playing against the ones and the twos, and they're doing so with equal opportunity in terms of snaps.
Keep in mind the wide receiver room, James, appreciate James calling in, but wide receiver room looks like this. As far as scholarship guys, you got Caleb Brown, Seth Anderson entering spring. You've got now a third-year guy in Jacob Bostic. You have Alex Mota, who's heading into his redshirt freshman year. You have Dayton Howard, who's also going to be a redshirt freshman. You have Jarrett Bowie, who will be a redshirt freshman, did not cross the 4-game mark that would have tossed that opening year of eligibility out. And that's pretty much it. Then you have a couple guys being added in the summer. Plus, you're going to have a number of walk-ons that have played and had some experience. Reese Osgood's a guy who's, he's been around the program for a while. Graham Friedrichsen, Alec Wick, Caden Weegan was brought up, Alex Eichmann, Aiden Price, Aiden McDermott. A couple of those are more inexperienced guys. Judah Mallett out of the Chicago area. Luke Pollock, also a walk-on that's been added recently. So, yeah, I mean, the room does not – once again, Don, we're going to be entering spring probably looking at receiver and saying, yeah, probably one of the least talented positions on the football field for Iowa. A lot to prove there. So there is a heavy load. I know it was brought up earlier about Tim Lester. Tim Lester has had, I believe at Western Michigan, he had a couple of receivers drafted fairly high. Maybe he's a guy who can, again, work hands-on. Not to say, he's a former quarterback himself, but how much can he help Tim Lester, even though he's got a job to do at quarterback?
Well, let's not forget that Tim Lester did manage to throw for over 11,000 yards in his 4 years. And I believe did play some quarterback in the CFL too, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right, Corey?
I believe that's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So he had a good record of achievement as a quarterback. And obviously he's quarterbacks, if they're smart, of course, some of the best friends they have on the team are receivers, because those guys are going to bail them out sometimes and make a great reception when the ball really wasn't exactly where it needed to be. So it happens that way sometimes in football. I do think that Tim's going to be a good asset for John going forward, that he should feel comfortable bouncing ideas off of John. Those guys have to be, off of Tim. Those guys need to be in constant communication anyway, because it is a group project. Let's face it, pass offense is not the responsibility of the quarterback group or the receiver group or the tight end group. It's on all of them. And of course, the backs need to be involved as well. The best thing we can do is spread the ball around a lot and line up with different ways so that we can find the best possible matchup. Take advantage of the weakness of the defense, whatever that might be.
Before we get to our next caller, we do have somebody on hold waiting to chat with Coach Patterson. I want to give a quick thank you to Iowa Floor Covering. They're another one of our longtime sponsors, and they are located down in Bondurant. Check out the flooring deals they've got going on for your DIY projects over at iowafloorcovering.com/DIY. If you're a contractor, a DIYer, or maybe just a homeowner looking for a flooring upgrade, or maybe you're working on a tile shower or have one in the works, give them a call, 515-379-7000, or visit their store in person down in Bondurant. Their website, again, is iowafloorcovering.com. All kinds of different flooring options to suit you and your next project. Again, Iowa Floor Covering down in Bondurant. Appreciate them sponsoring our Hawkeye Hangout here with Coach Don Patterson. Let's go back to our phone line. Thank you for calling Hawkeye Hangout here with Coach Don Patterson. Who's on the line?
Lomansky, Corey, how are you this evening?
Good, Lomansky. How are you?
Good, Don. Just want to thank you again for your time commitment to the Iowa fan. You sure did a lot during your coaching days. You don't always this, but it's nice to see some things the same, and to see your face gives me hope for the next fall. I find it interesting that Bobby Stoops talked about when he hired Mike Leach. And he told Mike Leach, he said, in 2 or 3 years, Mike, we're going to be successful enough that you'll be able to get a head coaching job after you work with me. And Bobby said, well, it took only 9 months and he got a head coaching job. And I sometimes think we don't give enough credit to Hayden's assistant coaches did the recruiting across the country. Don, you've talked about Texas. We had, and apologize for not remembering all the different assistant coaches in areas, but New Jersey, I knew some of those guys in college. Norm Granger, one of the neatest guys I've ever talked to in the Iowa football team. I think he was refereeing in Iowa the last few years as a ref. Barry Alvarez, who is really a Nebraska guy, but he coached Mason City High School, and Hayden hired him to let's beat Iowa State in the high school recruiting areas. And we don't give enough credit to those assistant coaches that lifted us. I'm hoping, and I'm pretty confident in this statement, that we have lost an opportunity, and not to say that, how do I put this properly? I don't know how much Brian adds to Kirk. And there's some overlap as far as knowledge and position and history. So I think we kind of lose a little recruiting momentum just by a lack of diversity. I'm hoping Tim Lester gives that diversity in a different part of the country, lists of recruiting in different areas. I'm pretty positive about that. And I'd like you to comment on maybe, I think there is a difference between different people at different positions during your day, Don, and maybe Western Illinois too, because you had good teams there, versus on the offensive side of the ball, we just don't have enough history, relationships that like Barry had, and so many of your assistant coaches in your time across the country to bring in talent, including the quarterback position. I'm not too impressed with John Budmayr bringing in this quarterback from Wisconsin. I mean, maybe, we didn't foresee that we'd drop down to our, number 2, number 3 quarterback coaches. Maybe I'm too critical there, but talk about the differences and what that means to a football program over time, Don.
Well, I do know this. I think it's critical. If you're in a small population state, as we are in Iowa, it's critical that we somehow come up with the largest possible recruiting footprint. And years ago, of course, we knew we were going to recruit Texas because Coach Fry's such a big name in the state of Texas. And you might recall, I've told the story, we brought up some of the best players in Texas our very first recruiting season, and we didn't sign a one. And I couldn't blame them. They came up and the weather was not very cooperative. And at that point, we hadn't really done anything. We hadn't won a game yet at Iowa. And Coach Fry then said, we're not going back to Texas until we win. We have to have something to sell to the players from that far away. And sure enough, when we clinched to go to the Rose Bowl in 81, I said, Coach, let me go back to Texas. And he agreed. He let me do that. And Carl Jackson went to the Houston area. I worked the north part of the state. And sure enough, we got some really, really good players out of the state of Texas. And at the same time, Bernie Wyatt had a foothold in New York and New Jersey because Bernie was from that area, of course. Lindenhurst, as I recall, if I'm not mistaken, or Amityville. Anyway, that part of the state. And as you know, we got some great players off the East Coast. But if you don't have a large recruiting footprint, then you're really fighting with one hand behind your back. Let's face it, to find a big sample of great players, you need to, that old adage, you got to kiss a lot of toads to find a prince. Well, that kind of applies to recruiting too. You got to look high and low for them, and with a little bit of luck, you'll find one that you're absolutely convinced is overlooked. It doesn't happen often, but when you do find a guy, maybe it's simply because of geography that he doesn't. A good example would be Cooper DeJean, I guess, a little small town in Iowa. And of course, Iowa State knew about him, but obviously a lot of schools did not know about him. And in that regard, it made it a little bit easier to recruit such a great player as Cooper. So you need to have a base of operation and recruiting much more than in the Midwest, because in the Midwest itself is not enough. You need to expand it even further. And doesn't really matter where you go. It's just got to be a place, hopefully, where your coaches have a good opportunity to be able to get honest answers out of the coaches and be able to sell the program wherever they happen to be located. You know, Florida's a possibility, of course. But the problem, as I've seen it from Florida, is maybe they're a little less likely to stay. Let's face it, the weather's harsh. It just depends. You know, every young man's a different story. You do have to. I'll give you an example. Robert Smith. When I was recruiting Robert, you know, he's one of the fastest players I ever had. And a lot of the coaches down in Texas, they told me, they said, "I know you guys will do a great job recruiting him, but what would make he's going to go to Iowa? You are aware it's just him and his mom, right? That's it. That mom's not going to let him go away to school." That's how they felt. Well, they were wrong, because Robert Smith's mom had a tremendous love for her son, and she wanted him to choose the place that he felt best about. And sure enough, off he goes to Iowa. I do recall he had 16 touchdown passes as a receiver in his career. He was a great push man, even when he wasn't getting the ball. He also returned punts and kickoffs for touchdowns. He scared the devil out of any cornerback that might have to figure out how to run with him. So we got a lot of good mileage out of Robert, and I'm proud to say he met his future wife right here at Iowa, and they're happily married right now up in Waterloo, Cedar Falls area. And as you know, Corey, Robert is a back judge in the Big Ten right now. So he's had a nice career as an official in the Big Ten. I'm very proud of that young man, because he had humble background, and yet he really excelled in so many ways when he came here.
The other thing that Lisa Bluter has done is been able to identify talent. Kashina Alexander from Minnesota, Megan Gustafson from Minnesota. One of the great catches from Iowa football was Mark Bortz. Mark Bortz was from Partyville, Wisconsin, probably the nastiest, meanest lineman that Iowa's ever had. You can disagree with that, Don, if you want, but I was at a party when I was in college with Mark Bortz, and that guy played hard and he partied hard. And I wouldn't come within 20 feet of that guy. He was one of the most menacing physical specimens, and kind of a kid that didn't know how tough he was. And for older viewers who don't remember, the Chicago Bears Super Bowl team, the last lineman to retire from that great line included a Hilgenberg from Iowa. Mark Bortz was the last to retire. That's how tough that bugger was. And just to identify talent, I think on the offensive side with Tim Lester should give us a lift. And you can comment on anything I talked about, Don, but I just love the character of how we recruit. And sometimes we bitch and moan about, you know, why can't we get a 4-star or a 5-star? But I want to compliment the Iowa program on the quality of people, from the women's basketball people to the men's basketball people to what Kirk has done, and I'll listen.
Yeah, let me give you a story about Mark Bortz. True story. Partyville, Wisconsin. There aren't too many listeners that have any idea what part of Wisconsin Partyville's in, but I will tell you this is how it all happened. We had a couple of good friends that helped us in the state of Wisconsin that traveled quite a bit, and one of those is still alive today. His name is Jack Smolowski. I'll give a shout out to Jack. I'm still in touch with him. I believe he's 91 years old, as I recall, and still sharp as he can be. Jack Smolowski is the guy that discovered Mark Bortz. He was watching Partyville play basketball. I believe it was during Mark's junior year, and Mark was running up and down the court. He looked like a football player, and yet he was running up and down the court like a basketball player. And he reported to Howard Sissel, who was our coach that recruited Wisconsin at the time, and he said, "You guys got to check this guy out, because he's getting a little bit overlooked. I'm sure it's a little town, but I am really impressed with him as an athlete, and he's tough and he's hard-nosed." And Jack Smolowski, incidentally, was working in a semi-pro football league, so he had some idea of what a football player looked like. That's how it all started with Mark Bortz. And as you know, he was an all Big Ten defensive lineman. And then let's give a lot of credit to a guy named Mike Ditka. Mike Ditka said, you can't make the Chicago Bears as a D lineman, Mark, but if you're agreeable to maybe making a transition to offensive line, then we'll absolutely sign you. And that's what happened. And Mark Moore's not just made a conversion to O-line. He ended up being a starter in the Super Bowl. And certainly one heck of a player. I think it's a wonderful story because it just gives you an idea that you can find great players sometimes in the most unlikely of places.
Don, can you confirm this story that I heard? I know it's true or false, but the Bears called Hayden to ask him about the Big Ten lineman. And Hayden said, "What are you looking for?" And they're looking for help in offensive line. And Hayden told them, this is a story I heard, you can say it's false or true. He said, "I'd take Mark Bortz and I'd turn him around if I was a Bears guy looking to draft somebody. He's the toughest guy I've ever seen on Iowa football." Is that story true?
To my knowledge, that is a very true story. I believe it happened exactly that way.
Yeah, I think that's a neat story, and credit to Hayden. And that just shows you the genius of the legacy of Iowa football. And I think the story continues that Hayden wanted to put him in the offensive line, but he couldn't with the talent in the whole football field, so he put him defensive line because that's where he needed him the most. And that's some of the stories that Iowa fans need to hear. And I'll close with this, Corey. You have CEO mentality. Your different sports shows, you put good talent around you, if not great, you put great talent around you. And just a shout out to Kyle that you have a good relationship, so you pick on each other pretty high, which I enjoy. But Kyle's a first-class guy, too, even with your mainstays also. So thanks for taking my call, Corey.
Thank you, Lemansky. Appreciate the kind words and the good conversation. Absolutely. Always get that from Mr. Lemansky. Rough Rider return says, "This makes me miss the post-game shows." So I give credit to Coach Patterson for that. Kelvin brings up Helverson, Happel, Harberts. We're not big-time recruits. Isn't Helverson also a referee, Don?
Yes, he is. Matter of fact, he's refereed in the Super Bowl before. I believe he's done 2 Super Bowls already. And that's not just you luck into that assignment. You have to earn that position to work that game. That's an all-star crew.
All right, folks. Well, I'll tell you what. We've got a couple people on hold here, and we're going to transition to something a little bit different. We've got a number of comments here in the chat, and I think Don's got at least another half hour with us. But here's what we've got going on this evening. The one and only NIA GOAT.
NIA.
NA. What did I say? NIA.
NIA.
I'm sorry. NAIA. Don, do you realize we are right now? We're sandwiching an NAIA legend. All of that.
I was not aware, but I need to be.
All of that.
Aware.
All of it. Nazarene golfing alum, Kyle Spence, with us. So.
This is back to back nights. He's poking fun at my athletic career.
I'm not poking fun. I'm being totally genuine. I've said I am not a collegiate. I never was a collegiate athlete. I'm with 2 people who have played college sports, and I have not. So that's you.
One thing I know for sure is Kyle could take our money on a golf course. I'm sure of that.
That's probably true.
The only time I'll be taking money on a golf course is for lessons now, Coach.
Kyle, did you make it out yesterday? Play around?
I did not, or not yesterday, but the day before I did.
You did over at Finkbine?
Brown Deer. Finkbine's going to open on March 20th, I believe.
What'd you shoot?
68.
He shot 68 at what is that, Brown Deer? Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
There you go, Coach. What do you shoot at Brown Deer?
As infrequently as I might. I like Finkbine better, tougher greens. One reason you've shot 68 on Brown Deer is because you don't have Finkbine's greens.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Finkbine. So Brown Deer was the course I grew up on. So I live about 5 minutes away from there. So that was kind of that was my playground as a kid. So Fink Pine's now my high school and college home. But
well, here's what we're going to do, folks. I have some company in town today, and so we're going to hand this off to Kyle for at least the last half hour of the show, and we're gonna see what he and Coach Patterson cook up here. So we've got a number of people. I know we've got Corey in the queue line, and we've got at least 7 comments, questions. If you have a question, the phone line is going to be going down as I leave. So if you're going to call in, do so by means of StreamYard. The link is in the description below. If you want to chat with Coach Patterson and or Kyle, you can do that. And of course, I will be back with everybody. Let's see. Well, we'll have to publish some content tomorrow with the Caitlyn Clark news breaking today. And then, of course, we've got post-game shows on Saturday and on Sunday with the big Iowa women's game. So, Don, it's been a pleasure. I'm sure you and I will chat later, but appreciate you taking the time. Kyle, it's all yours. Be kind to some of our people, and especially to Coach Patterson. Lemansky, thank you for the super chat. He says, I attended the UCLA Hawkeye Rose Bowl and Rose Parade because of Coach Don. Thank you for great memories. So,
thank you, Lemansky. I appreciate that.
I will see all of you tomorrow. Coach, Kyle, thank you for your time, and have a great rest of the show.
Will do. All right, Coach. Looks like it's our asylum to run now, huh?
That sounds good. I understand there's a few calls in the what do you call it? In
the queue.
In the queue, yeah. Thank you. I knew there was a word.
Yeah, I'm sure people will be lining up to talk to us now that Corey has exited stage right. Well, I've been listening to a little bit of the first part of the show, so hopefully I don't go over too many things that have been already hit. You guys have addressed Budmayr pretty well. I'm curious because we're kind of in the dog days of the year for football. These are kind of the days that nobody hears about, and the days that are really kind of silent as far as news. What is the most important thing that happens during this time period, or what is the key as far as coaching during this part of the year?
Well, you are allowed to spend, I don't know what the NCAA rule is now, but you have a limited amount of time you can spend with your team, even in the off season. So this time of the year, you can bet that they're spending a lot of time in the weight room, a lot of time on the practice field, indoors, of course, unless the weather's good, simply working on their speed and quickness, their explosiveness. The players are taught, every day you either get a little bit better or a little bit worse. And the challenge is for you to put one productive day right after another one. And the gains are not significant from one day to the next. But of course, if you just imagine if you can improve 1%, even 1% every day of your life as a football player, of your college life as a football player, how well you would be able to play. Even 1% is maybe not realistic. How about half of 1%? Even if you can do that, you're talking about significant improvement, of course, over an 8-week span, let's say. You make gains in small steps. It's the difference in, your in the weight room goes up by only 5%, but still that gives you a chance to actually overpower that guy you're going against the next time you line up against an opposing player in the following fall. So you got to recognize you don't waste a day. You make them all count. To this day, I feel like sometimes my wife will say, well, you're kind of in a grumpy mood tonight. And I said, well, I feel like I didn't accomplish anything today. Even in retirement at age 73, I like to accomplish something from one day to the next. I hate to think at the end of the day that you really didn't get much done. Even in retirement, there's got to be things that are worth doing. There's got to be things you can do for others that are worth doing. It's really at the end of your life, shame on you if people don't want to celebrate the life that you led, because that's an opportunity for anyone. I've always been able to say, Kyle, there are only two kinds of people in the world. There are givers and there are takers. And you need to be sure that you're in the giver group, because if you are, you'll be rich for the rest of your days. And I'm not talking about rich in terms of bank account, but just rich in terms of relationships. And let's face it, as you get older, Kyle, you're not there yet, but at some point you'll realize, it really doesn't have much to do with how much money I have in the bank or what kind of car I drive or how big my house is. What really matters is, do I have great relationships? Do I have a great relationship with my own family, with my own children? Do I have a great relationship with my work associates? Do I have a great relationship with neighbors and friends? Shame on you if you don't, because, I can't imagine. It would be a terrible thing to be lonely in your later years simply because you didn't develop friendships you could count on. I've got some people I consider to be lifelong friends. If I called them up tomorrow and said, listen, I've got a real emergency, it's short notice, but I need to borrow $100,000 from you. I have friends that would say, well, give me a little bit of time. It's going to take me some time to get that together, but yes, I'm here for you. Money, of course, it might just be about providing a shoulder to cry on when you need one. Maybe you have a personal problem that maybe only one dear friend can help you with, and with a little bit of luck, you don't have any hesitation to reach out to him and help him to solve your problem. That's what great friends do for each other.
I think certainly for the off season, and again, my experience is different than yours and the football players right now. But we do have an off season too, and one thing I always like to kind of drive home to myself is, people that athletes in particular, but people in general that are lazy are always concerned that they're working too hard, and people that are working hard always are scared that they're being too lazy. I think that's a theme that I've seen in a lot of teammates and a lot of people that I've surrounded myself with, and always, looking for opportunities to improve. Because I mean, you're talking about the weight room. If you're 1%, 2%, 3% better than you were the year before at this level, you're going to be a heck of a player. So anything you can do during this time to improve is very, very valuable. We've got other Corey. What is it? Are you Corey number 2 or Corey number 3? I get you guys mixed up.
I'm Corey number 2 because
you're number 2.
I must be number 2 because every time I want to get on this show, Corey leaves now. So he doesn't love me anymore.
He doesn't want the confusion when you come on.
I was going to say he can't stand the heat, so he's got to get out of the kitchen.
Now, the last time Kyle and I were on here together, I can't even remember the controversy that we stirred up. Totally unintentionally. I think something we said was misconstrued or something. But anyway,
were you the one that was talking about? It was a conversation about Tony Perkins, right?
Yes.
About former, and I think was it Cash came on and said, like, I didn't know what I was talking about because I didn't mention any guards from the 1980s and 90s. I was like, come on, Cash, cut me some slack here. I'm 23 years old.
Oh no, and I know what it is, and this is my chance to kind of make amends. It was about the fact I don't think we mentioned Ronnie Lester.
Yes,
the legendary Ronnie Lester, who. That was my childhood. He was going to take us to he was as close to a Caitlyn Clark as was possible in men's basketball for Iowa at the time. And of course he tears up his knee, and all of the, we never got to see it come to fruition, but that could have been a national championship team realistically.
Corey, correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't that happen maybe in the semifinals, the national semifinals?
I believe so. I was quite young then, but
I believe that's right. I think it happened in the semifinal game.
But what a legendary player. And, after him, it was you had Kenny Arnold was another. And, but I'm getting away from my original point, but I get mind blown. See, I'm stuck up here in Michigan, and all this Iowa talk, it does something to me. I'm sorry, I miss my home state. You don't know what you've got until it's gone, or you don't know what you've got or what you had until you're gone. But I chose a career in golf, and I ended up marrying the receptionist girl up here at the TPC of Michigan. So I'm stuck in the state of Michigan now. And I had a career in golf as a golf course superintendent. And I always was one of those that I'm not working hard enough. 120 hours a week. Am I doing enough? Well, anyway, that's probably why this hair is gray or white or whatever. But it was a rewarding career. And I love golf. But I have one regret. And that's that I didn't take selected periods of time out to make sure that I played, and I didn't just work there, but I played. Kyle, promise that you're going to play, even if it's once every week, once every 2 weeks. Play golf. Don't just work there.
Well, I can tell you those. We've gone through this at Finkbein. Our superintendent just announced that he's leaving us, and I could tell you those guys, that greenskeeping staff, and that superintendent is the heartbeat of that golf course. From as far as operations outside go, obviously events are different. We've got staff inside for that, but those guys are the heart and soul of the greenskeeping operation, and really of the entire golf course. We're completely indebted to what those guys do in keeping the golf course in shape for everybody that plays and all the events that come. So it's certainly a weird time for me coming out of college, because I'm kind of looking my own athletic mortality in the face at this point. Because if at this point I'm going to be teaching this year at Finkbein, so I'll probably continue to plug that. If anybody's interested in golf lessons, that's I'll be there. But it's at this point, it's once you collect money for lessons, you either go professional or stop competing. And so I'm kind of at that point now where it's I either got to double down or back away. And I think I'm going to try and give it 1 or 2 more years of really good hard practice to see if I can make anything out of it. But we'll see. I always appreciate the game. It's been a great therapist for me over the years. So it's as good as it gets.
It's a great game, and we've got in a society where we don't have enough time and we're always in a hurry. Golf requires you to take time out, set aside time, and spend the time. And I hope that we don't discount what golf provides us. It's a special game, and it's and as a guy who played. I played at Kirkwood Community College after Marion High School. We finished 3rd in state at Marion High School. I went to Kirkwood, then we went down, and I went down with my buddy at Missouri State. Tried to walk on there. I had another buddy that walked on, and his brother Kevin Brower played. He was punter for the football team down in Springfield. But anyway, enough about me. But golf's a great game. But you guys, I just love listening to this show because you guys bring me back to Iowa. I miss it. I miss it greatly. We have a special, special place. So I'm going to try to get it back on task here. And it was more of an X's and O's question, because when we have Don on, we've got to take advantage of this time.
Absolutely.
So, Don, my question is, with respect to the Iowa passing game, and I'm kind of a percentages guy, but, I think back to the great wide receivers that we've had at Iowa, and I think it was Kelvin Fisher that stole my thunder. But Billy Happel, Scott Helverson, I mean, that was my time as a kid. Those were the names that came across the screen. And then more recently, Marvin McNutt and Amir Smith-Marset. And of course, let's not discount Matt Vandenberg. Let's not discount Charlie Jones. And of course, Nick Easley, who had an MVP in a bowl game, and Nico Ragaini had some big time games as well. But what is the percentage of responsibility for the success of the passing game when you look at the individual pieces? You've got individual receiver talent, you've got route trees and combinations, you've got the overall offensive scheme and the inert or embedded threats within the structure of the scheme, drawing the eyes of safeties, linebackers, etc. And then you throw in the element of speed or burners or game breakers like your Robert Smiths, and let's see, we had Quinn Early. I don't know if he was as much of a speedster as Robert. Yeah, but I mean, number one, number two. So there's a reason they had those low numbers.
Those guys with the low numbers invariably run fast.
But I guess my question is, what level of importance would you weigh? What level of importance would you give to route trees, offensive structures, individual skill, and then just the ability to run good routes? I mean, what is this Iowa offense going to need, and what can it draw from in order to find success in the pass game with what it has?
Well, here's the reality of the passing game. Just talking about what it takes to have an effective, functioning pass offense, ownership has to go all over the place. And the mindset has to be, if we have a weak link within that complicated thing called pass offense, then the whole thing's going to come tumbling down. I'll give you an example. And part of the solution, of course, relates to the guy taking snaps. If you don't have the right guy that's able to make good decisions with where the ball should go, and even that's just part of it, his job. He decides where it's going to go, and then he's got to be able to deliver it with accuracy on time. That's not easy to do. That's a huge responsibility, and it's complicated. So you better have a really, really bright person in charge of doing that. I'm talking about both the quarterback and the coach. Both better be bright. But then beyond that, the receiver, of course, has to run precise routes. You mentioned Billy Happel and Scott Helverson. Think about this. Believe it or not, we won with double cuts with those guys sometimes, because let's face it, if you're not as fast as another receiver, the quarter's going to tend to play you a little bit tighter, which means if you can effectively run an out and go or a stop and go or a slant and go, a sluggo as they call it, if you can effectively run those routes, even if you have substandard speed, you can still win over the top. Now, the first thing you got to do, of course, is make them frustrated to have to tackle you on the underneath cuts. But once you're able to tighten them down a little bit, even a so-called slow receiver can stay over the top with outstanding route. And Billy Happel and Scott Helver could give you that, as could any number of other guys. So you don't have to be the world's fastest human, but it does help. Helps a lot. I've always said this: if your receivers cannot scare the other team into whether or not they can defend deep, then you better continue to look for speed at receiver, because you need to be able to threaten to win over the top. And it can be as simple as a go route. You know, it doesn't have to involve great route running. It just has to involve being able to work to get your helmet and shoulder pads beyond theirs. And versus press coverage, that's where it all starts. You got to understand how to use your hands to get off the line of scrimmage. You got to recognize that We want to be able, you don't run away from a corner if he's pressed on you. You clear him with your helmet and shoulder pads as quickly as you can, and you try to establish verticality on your release. And then if he's got good coverage, at that point, the quarterback throws the ball away from the defender, and that's why we call it a fade route, because the receiver fades away from the defender because he sees the ball and the defender hasn't seen it yet. So it all starts with good route running. You got to know exactly how to attack any defender. And that comes with a lot of learning. And frankly, if you don't have all the answers, you better talk to someone that does, because nobody's going to have any sympathy for you next fall. So I'm sure John's a smart guy. John's going to reach out to somebody that he knows that can help him to learn more about receiver play. And that's what any good coach does. They don't rely on just what they've learned on their own. They show initiative to go talk to someone else that maybe knows more about it than they do. And then getting back to the problem you have with developing a pass offense, let's not forget another key element, and that's the thing called pass protection. You better have good protectors up front. And you've heard me say before, Kyle, and Corey, maybe you've heard me say it too. It's nice to have an All-American offensive lineman, but that doesn't solve your problem, because that All-American lineman is going to consistently block exactly one guy. He's not going to be able to block two. In very unusual circumstance, can he account for two? But in general, he can block his one guy, but he can dominate him. The question, though, of course, is what about the other four guys? So you got 5 different individual battles up front, and to make the ball move, ideally you win all 5 of those matchups. At the very least, you better win 4 out of 5, because if there's a couple of breakdowns within the front, you're going to have a hard time consistently moving the ball. We've been through that before. It's complicated unless you can develop some kind of consistency up front involving those 5 linemen.
And also to add to that, Coach Don, I think one of the interesting things about this situation is you have a position group that is really, last couple of years, has really, really struggled. And you've got this guy coming in who, at this position, coaching this position, he's unproven to this point. And I'd like to give him a fair shot. I've heard you and Corey and everybody else say he's a great man. I appreciate that, being part of the Iowa culture. How do you evaluate somebody like Budmayr, who's coming into, who number one is unproven, number 2 is coming into a position group that is really, really struggling? Obviously, you can't expect success right away, but what things do you look for as far as a coach, or how do you evaluate somebody coming into a situation like this?
Well, if I were in position to try to assist John at all with his conversion to a wide receiver coaching position, I'm pretty sure that he's heard this from other valued input from other coaches. If you don't have all the answers, first off, if you think you have all the answers, you're wrong. So I'm sure that John's smart enough to realize I don't nearly have all the answers. I have to be talking to people now that do have more answers than I do, people I can learn from. And that's not to be insecure with what you know. You're simply on a mission to learn as much as you possibly can about that position you're going to coach. Your players need to recognize you as an expert at receiver play. And if you don't feel like you can convince them of that at this point in time, you better take steps to develop a lot more knowledge than what you have, because they're going to lean on you for advice on how to become a better player. No different than a golf coach working with a young golfer. He'd like to assume that you know more about the mechanics of a golf swing than he does. How else are you going to learn from his input if he's not there to give you good advice in that search for that perfect swing that we all someday hope to have? But I'm sure that John recognizes everybody has mentors in their profession. And maybe up until now, John hasn't had a coaching mentor that was involved at all with receiver play. Well, John hadn't been coaching receivers, so that's okay, but that day is now here. And John's obligation to this football program and to Coach Ferentz is to be the best damn receiver coach he can be, and to do it between now and a few weeks from now, to get it done as quickly as possible. You need that sense of urgency. And if you ever get to the point where you feel like you've got all the answers, then at that point you probably should retire, because I promise you, even then, you don't everything there is to learn. It's
What,
a continual
is there any
quest for knowledge.
is there anybody that you would have on a short list, Don, of people you think he should reach out to?
Oh, well, that's a tough question. I know a guy that comes to mind for me is a guy I got to coach, a guy named Frisman Jackson. He is now the receiver coach for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Wow.
He was a quarterback at Northern Illinois. We beat Northern Illinois when he was playing for them. And he contacted us after the season, and he said, I was a lot more impressed with your offense than I was ours. So I'm wondering, do you think maybe I can consider transferring to Western Illinois? And we did get him. And when he came in, he was a really talented athlete. He played, I think, about 8 years in the NFL, as I recall, as a receiver, of course. And now he's coaching receivers in the NFL. And the interesting thing about it, he was a really talented quarterback. But one time, Frisman came in and he said, Coach, I know you'll be honest with me. Tell me this, because we had another good quarterback too. He said, do you think I'm better suited to make an NFL team as a quarterback or as a receiver? And I said, Frisman, you're looking for an honest answer, aren't you? He said, you know I am, Coach. And I said, well, to be honest with you, I would suggest to you that you have a better chance at receiver. And I'll tell you why. It doesn't mean you're not a really quality quarterback that doesn't project well as a quarterback. But honestly, at that point in time, I felt there were certain NFL teams that maybe if they really admitted to it, didn't really want a black quarterback. There was more racism then, I think, in professional football than there is now. And I said, you're certainly capable of playing quarterback in the NFL, but I think a better path for you, honestly, Frisman, would be to make it as a receiver. And he took that to heart. And two of our best players were those two quarterbacks, one of which was still playing quarterback, the other one of which was our leading receiver. And Frisman had a great career at Western Illinois. I forget what his numbers were, but somewhere around 1,000 yards a year, something like that. That's a lot of yardage for a receiver to have. But he certainly is a receiver. And then he had a nice career in the NFL. And I followed his coaching career, and we still stay in touch even now. He did coach some college ball as I recall, at Temple at one time, and also at Baylor at one time. Format rule, incidentally, the coach at Nebraska now. And then from there, he went to the NFL. He's been coaching with the Steelers now in recent years, and coached for Carolina for a while with Matt Rule. And so his career is going really well. I'm proud of him for the NFL coach that he's become. And I'm proud of the fact that he was part of our coaching tree at Western Illinois.
Anything else, Corey?
Yeah, two things. First off, I got this is for Lemansky. He struck a recall from the other night. I was flipping through I think it was YouTube, and up pops I'm sorry, not our Hawkeyes, the Chicago Bears in the Super Bowl. And here I'm looking at the back of the jerseys, and I swear to you, it was Bortz and Hilgenberg.
Absolutely.
Backs of those with William the Refrigerator Perry. And that was the Super Bowl game. And I never realized until the other night that as far as unless I was delusional, Mark Bortz and Jay Hilgenberg were on that same team together in the Super Bowl. I realized that.
Yep, absolutely true.
And secondly, or lastly, and I'm kind of beating a dead horse here, but Don, I reflect back on this can be a two-part question. One's a pop trivia, the other one's going to be philosophical or whatever. But I just think back in the Chuck Long days, we threw that ball all over the field on everybody. No one could stop it. They knew it was coming, and we'd still throw it all over the field. It was unstoppable. And I always ask you this, and you're going to say it's the responsibility of everybody. But I guess what was different about that team from what we've got coming up this season, and what is similar to that team as to what we've got coming up this season? And what would this team have to do this season to be able to throw the ball around and move the ball around like you guys did back then? And then secondly is, who was the receivers coach? Did it change, or who was the receivers coach back during that time?
The receiver coach in the 80s was a guy named Bill Snyder. He coached quarterbacks and receivers.
Okay.
Incidentally, Bill, Hayden's always said he took great pride in being able to pick good assistant coaches. And when he hired Bill Snyder didn't have much of a resume, hired him to North Texas. Bill was coaching at a little school called Austin College in Sherman, Texas. So he didn't have a great resume at that point in time. But Hayden saw something in Bill. And I'll tell you one thing that he saw. Bill was a grad assistant at the University of Southern Cal, and he learned from a guy named John McKay there. And I believe he learned a little bit from Coach McKay. Of course, Southern Cal had great players, but John McKay was a good football coach too, and Bill Snyder was a grad assistant for John McKay, just like I was a grad assistant for Hayden Fry. Those two are great mentors. And obviously, Hayden knew a lot about the passing game. He was ahead of his time. I'll tell you one story that's pretty interesting. We're getting ready to play LSU when I was at Western Illinois, and I flashed back on the fact Nick and I had some history of coaching against each other when he was at Michigan State. He was there as a DB coach, and there was a head coach too. And we were reflecting during the pregame, we were reflecting that 1985 season. I'm sorry, the 81 season. And the game that clinched the Rose Bowl was against, you might recall, I take that back. I'm getting my years mixed up. It was 85. 85 because we were number one ranked coming back from Iowa State. Number one ranked early season. The very next game happened to be against Michigan State. The DB coach that day was Nick Saban. The final score, you might recall even, was 35-31. Iowa, of course. That was that game, yes. But as I was reflecting back on that game with Nick Saban, I was trying to think of something good to say to Nick because I knew they lost that day. And I said, Nick, you guys were the first team we saw that did a great job of disguising coverage. That's to your credit that you did that. You were the DB coach. And his response was, well, hell, it didn't do us any good because you guys were far ahead of your time too, because all your guys did was route adjust to the different coverage. It didn't matter what we played. You were going to adjust to the right route anyway, to the proper route. And he's right. We were ahead of our time because that's the way we taught football. You would run an entirely different route depending on what the coverage was. You got to have smart football players, and they have to be well taught to get that done. But if you're able to adjust your routes, obviously you have a better chance of success on any given play. And that's what we did even as early as 1981. I should back up further. We did it at North Texas before we ever came to Iowa. But we had more success, more notoriety doing it on a bigger stage, like in the Big Ten.
All right. Well, hey, thanks, Don. I love it. And Kyle promised on a large scale stage here that he's going to golf on a regular basis. He's not going to just ignore that. And it's work hard, play hard, right? So
absolutely.
But anyway, just really enjoy the show. Thanks so much. And you guys bring a little part of Iowa back to me, and up here in cold, lonely Michigan. So I love it. And
Corey, that black and gold still looks really good on you.
Yes,
absolutely.
And the last thing I'll say is, it hit me hard here, Caitlyn Clark. I have not seen her play in person, and that breaks my heart. And
it's not too late. It's not too late. There's a tournament. Tournament in the Twin Cities.
If Indiana does in fact have the first pick, maybe you can drive down from Michigan to see her.
Well, definitely that. But I want to see her as a Hawkeye. So I'm hoping. Yeah. I don't know if it's possible. I don't know where they end up in the tournament. But I'm hoping I can somehow pull off sneaking down and catching her in a tournament from the nosebleed somewhere.
I think last I heard, we're in the Portland region for Sweet 16 Elite 8, I think.
So
I could be wrong. But
a ticket in Carver is going to be impossible. That's not happening.
Maybe your best opportunity, honestly, Corey, might be the Big Ten tournament in the Twin Cities. I don't know if you can get up there, but that might be a ticket that you can actually get and actually afford.
If they do end up in the Final Four, the Final Four for women's basketball is at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse in Cleveland, Ohio. So
yeah, that's
going to cost you.
That's good. I love the geography, but I don't like the monetary.
Oh yeah, I can't tell you how many times I've been like, man, I really want to go and see her tonight. I put tickets row 40 in the corner, and it's like $150 or $200. It's insane, but it's all credit to what she's been able to accomplish and what Lisa's been able to build there with her for the last couple of years. Because the fact that they've created that level of demand is just absurd, and they all deserve everything.
Well, the thing I like about the fact that she's already declared, this at least gives us a chance to enjoy these seniors on their farewell tour.
Yes,
this will be the last game, the last regular season game that she'll ever play in Carver Hawkeye. But of course, the first two rounds of the tournament in our arena too. So we'll get to see her at least 3 more times in Carver Hawkeye. I think. Hopefully, we have to win. We have to win in the first round to get to this going.
Yeah.
And kind of like Cooper DeJean, I feel like we didn't get a chance to say goodbye.
Yeah,
it was up in the air, and it's nice that Caitlyn's got a decision made. Now we know.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Corey, let's say this: if they do make it to Cleveland, I will promise you this: there's going to be an open. I would be willing to bet you there'll be an open practice in advance of that game, and that's a good opportunity for you. Even if you can't afford the ticket, go to the practice.
That's the wisdom of a 72-year-old man. I think I will take heed to that recommendation.
Yeah.
I wish I was 72. I just turned 73.
Oh my goodness! Well,
But he's counting.
Well, thank you guys. Great show. Keep up the great work.
Thank you, Corey.
Absolutely. Appreciate it, Corey. Always good to have Corey with us. Corey did mention Cooper DeJean, Don. I think, I don't know if Corey went over this early. Corey Brada went over this earlier, but Cooper DeJean did announce he will be having a workout on campus because he's unable to participate in the draft due to the fractured fibula that he suffered in November that ended his Hawkeye career. But he did say he's been cleared by doctors. He's been running full speed, he says, ever since last week. So he's going to work out on campus at Iowa for some NFL teams ahead of the draft.
Yeah. And Kyle, if I'm not mistaken, I think you said participate in the draft. What you meant was participate in the combine, right?
Combine, yes. He's not able to participate in the combine. He's currently number 15 on Mel Kiper's latest big board. So he's looking to be a mid first round pick. I think from a lot of the stuff I've been reading, I think he's the first. Is he the first white cornerback drafted in the first round in like 40 years? It's not really relevant, but I thought that was a wild.
It might be true, and let's face it, if it does happen in the first round, it's not just because of his ability to play defense. Yeah. It's also the kick return, kick cover stuff too.
Absolutely. Yeah, he'll provide a lot of value in a lot of different ways. All right, we got a few.
I should say punt return. I'm sorry. I said kick return. I meant punt return.
Yes. Well, you never know. He could be employed on both. You never know in the NFL. He could get the call up for both. All right, we've got a few chats here that we've gotten just a touch behind on. So let's rock through some of those. Well, Jeffrey says, I thought the problem was the Brian offense. Now it's the QB coach. Well, I think that was from the conversation earlier. Brian was the QB coach last year, correct? So
officially he was, yes.
Yes.
The reality though is it was.
The reality was it was who?
The reality is it was John Budmayr.
Yes. Okay. All right. Perfect. Hawkeye Howard says, Corey and Coach, who do you think will transfer out of Iowa? From what Corey has told me, they've had a couple different people that are backups or kind of have spelled at times, but I don't think from what I've heard from Corey that we have really many, if any, players that got significant time last season that are looking at leaving. I think what he said, there's no real significant difference makers. I think that's it'll be big to keep everybody on top of getting Proctor in the portal.
Yeah. Our listeners, Kyle, might be curious. Corey alluded to it, that we're over our max right now. To my knowledge, and I'm sure it's not entirely accurate, but it's ballpark. The last number I heard was 92. We're at 92 a while back in time, and we have to be at 85 when they report to camp next fall. So we will lose some players. Hopefully it's just natural attrition. Hopefully it's someone that simply doesn't feel that they're going to project for a lot of playing time here, and they're more than okay with moving along and pursuing more playing time somewhere else. Hopefully it's no one that scares our fan base, the fact that they're no longer on the team. So one way or the other, we got to get down to 85. Yeah. I think that's something that's very doable. With a little bit of luck, we won't have to ask anyone to leave that doesn't want to leave, doesn't want to pursue an opportunity somewhere else.
Yeah, from what Corey said, I think natural attrition will likely take them into that 87 range, 86 range. So they may have to have one or two tough conversations, but I don't think it's going to be something like they're not going to have to ask 7 different people to leave. That's not something that's going to happen. I don't know. I don't really envision Kirk having a ton of those conversations anyways.
Yeah. The listeners need to be aware. It's not a 5-year contract. It's a 1-year renewable contract.
Yes.
So if a coach is put into a position where he is not able to retain a certain player, then that doesn't mean he's a terrible person. It's just the reality of the transfer portal and trying to field a team that is as competitive as it can be. And no one wants to send a young man packing unless they want to leave. But the reality is that might have to happen depending on, on how you're going to get down to 85. One way or the other, you got to make it to 85.
Yep. T. Hink says, I would like to know if Tim Lester will use waist downs. Now, I don't know what you listened to of that Tim Lester press conference, Coach. I assume you listened to all of it.
I was there that day.
You were, yes. Okay, good. So you would have heard Corey ask his question to Kirk Ferentz, wouldn't you?
I'm sorry, what was that last part of the question?
Did you were you there for Corey's question to Kirk Ferentz?
I was there.
So for those that aren't aware, the question wasn't specifically about waist downs, but it was in the ballpark. He was asking about total yardage because, and there's a reason for this. I'll give some background. So Kirk has obviously said, and it was out there in a lot of the Big Ten media posts, they do these funny clips where they put out, they ask a coach a question and then all the coaches answer it in the Big Ten, and they montage it together and they put it out on social media. So the question in this particular video that went out at the beginning of last season was, what's the most useless stat in football? Kirk Ferentz's answer was total yardage on offense. So with that context, then they hired Tim Lester to be the offensive coordinator. The post that the University of Iowa put out to promote Tim Lester was his total offensive numbers from Western Michigan. Those were the numbers that were provided as kind of enthusiasm for the fan base or hope for the fan base about why this guy would be good for the job. So Corey then asked, and I think his second question that he was hoping to ask was waist downs. But the first question he got to was, do you believe that total yardage is a useful stat? And if you don't, then it's a little confusing. And I'm butchering the exact wording, but if you don't, then it's a little confusing that those total yardage numbers were used to promote the offensive coordinator if the program stance is that total yardage is not a valuable statistic. So that was Corey's question. I thought it was interesting. There were certain members of the media, I won't name names, that were not fans of that question. There were several of I don't know if you're aware of the paid message boards, Don, the black hole that is the paid message boards, where they put all this Iowa information out there, but we had some unnamed individuals that were calling it a gimmick question or a trap question even. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah. Corey asked questions that fans might want to ask if they were in that same room. I think Corey feels like he represents the fans with Q&A.
Yeah. And I think with what he does here, I think that's probably a justified feeling that he has, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Frank Adamo says, how about the extra DBs we have? Can't they play wide receiver? How do you feel about this, Coach? How do you feel about players switching not only positions but sides of the ball? I know we talked about Cooper DeJean potentially getting in the game as a wide receiver or some kind of offensive playmaker. He's obviously a special athlete. How does that apply to other people?
Frank brings up a good question. In general, it doesn't work well, and we used to joke about it. Of course, if you have exceptional athleticism and you have soft hands, you play wide receiver. If you don't, of course, you play defensive back. The joke is, even if he's covered, throw it anyway, because we know that DB can't judge a football in flight. So if it's a jump ball situation, then our guy will win. There are certain DBs where I felt that was true. Sometimes we would even advise quarterbacks, don't be afraid to put the ball up against that particular corner because he doesn't have good ball skills. But Frank also, I'm sure, would be willing to argue the fact that some DBs do have good hands and maybe had a lot of success playing wide receiver in high school. That's entirely possible. Maybe it was not an easy decision that they start off playing DB in college because they were equally skilled on both sides of the ball. And in those situations, if a great talent at defensive back is stuck behind an even better player, let's face it, the first thing we better do is get our best 22 players out there as starters. Rather than be a backup corner, what about being a starter at receiver? If we need help at receiver and that player can give it to us, then I think Frank is right. We should absolutely consider DBs to be able to switch over and play receiver. It works in both directions.
Yeah, it's a very interesting point. Obviously, probably in most cases coming from a point of desperation, although I will say Iowa is likely the exception to that rule of if you can't catch, play DB, because those, I could tell you, watching Iowa, even the last 3 or 4 years, those DBs can catch that football.
Some people might argue that they actually have more reliable hands than our receiving corps.
Yeah, I didn't want to say it, but I'll let you make that comment. M Thin says, has anyone on the wide receiver roster caught more than 10 passes? Well,
Kyle, you would know better than I.
Yeah, so this year of the receivers that are returning, Caleb Brown leads that group with, I think we have lost Coach Don. Hopefully to get him back here in just a couple minutes. Caleb Brown has 22 catches on the year last year for 215 yards. He's returning. Seth Anderson has 11 catches for 150 yards, 13.6 yards a catch. And Deontay Vines has 12 receptions for 134 yards. Luke Lachey has 10, and LaShawn Williams as well has 12. So that's what they're working with. Unfortunately, they don't have depth. They don't have tons of talent at that position. But they have a couple guys. I mean, I think we're all excited about Caleb Brown. I think Seth Anderson will be a lot better next year. And as long as they can get contributions from those two, few contributions from some other guys, Ostrenga and Lachey will be able to carry the load. Let's see here. Hoping we're getting Coach Don back because I'd like to finish up some conversations while Coach Don's gone. We'll address some of these some of these comments. T. Hank says, Kyle, can we talk about your golf game? We will for just 5 minutes while we wait for Don to come back. My best round, we'll keep it tournament play only, not practice rounds. My best career tournament round was a 64. I've shot 64 once and 65 twice in tournaments. Those are my 2 or 3 low rounds. Let's see here. What do we have? South Bend Hawkeye. You play at Blue Top Ridge, South Bend Hawkeye. That is a good golf course. I played there off the tips twice this last year. I think only twice, and shot 72 and 75. I think 71 or 70 is my low there off the tips. It's a very difficult golf course. Not easy to score and very, very long too. About 7,600 yards off the tips, if I remember. Let's see here. Well, I wasn't expecting to lose Coach John this early. David has acknowledged that. Carrie says, Cooper DeJean said in an interview that he originally wanted to play quarterback. I would have loved to have seen him try out that position. Me too, Carrie. I would have loved to have seen them mix it up with him at quarterback, as a wildcat, as a thrower, as a wide receiver in a jet sweep like they did a couple times, as a wide receiver just running a route, even using him as a decoy. I think he would have caused so much havoc and put so much attention on himself. I think he would have been effective even if they didn't even give him the ball. I think anything would have been effective. I think if he would have come back this next year, my gut tells me they would have used him a little bit more in that sense, especially if he was looking to make a push for any major award like the Heisman. I think that would have been a no-brainer. I think they would have done that. But Brandon says Cooper was a quarterback in high school, a successful one. Evans was a successful high school quarterback in high school. Yeah, Cooper was a great athlete in high school. I know he was a great basketball player as well as a football player. So multi-sport athlete and track as well, I believe. So he had a lot of success. He's going to be special at the next level. It's sad to see him go, but we will look back on him after his NFL career and realize that he was one of the great players ever to come out of Iowa. I really do believe that. South Bend Hawkeye, Coop at QB1 would have given us a chance against UM and possibly Natty Talk last year. I agree. South Bend Hawkeye, I think Corey and I were at that game, at the Big Ten championship game, and I can't tell you how frustrating it was for us to travel all the way down there. And really, being on the show, breaking down the game and talking about all the things that they could do to be competitive in this game. And it just felt like they didn't do anything. There was no creativity. Even down 21 at times, it still looked like they didn't even try to win that game. Is what it looked like. They didn't try to throw any kind of curveball at Michigan. And that was very, 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 very disappointing. It was one of the more painful experiences of my Hawkeye life. Cy Hoxie Money says, with the installation of this new RPO offense involving split-second quarterback, running back exchanges, do you expect to see an increase in turnovers along with additional yardage? Does the RPO increase turnovers? It's an interesting question. I wish we had Coach Don here to answer that. I think the reality is that a Kirk Ferentz offense is always going to his mindset is always to limit turnovers. So I'm curious to see how this works. They did say, they said in the press conference that changing things up and throwing some of that stuff into the works was on the table. That it was not something that he had done at Western Michigan that he couldn't bring to Iowa. So I think we'll see it. I don't know how much. I think we'll see it maybe 4 or 5 times a game. And it'll be interesting to see. They'll definitely see an uptick in yardage because they're at 250 yards a game. You can't get much worse than that. So the yardage will definitely be up. we'll see if the turnovers are up. I don't know, but I suspect that the turnovers will not be up relative to this year, because as we know, and we've been through this at length on the show over and over again, Deacon Hill was one of the most turnover prone quarterbacks in the country, if not the most turnover prone quarterback in the country. So even running those plays, I don't think they'll turn the ball over as much as they did. So I think it'll all be positive. I don't know how good they'll get, but I see them getting into the top 110 to 100 in total offense, and we'll see how much further they can go. I know that doesn't sound like much, but I would take a top 100 offense right now if you would give it to me. Cy Money also says Cooper DeJean broke his leg on offense, though. I don't know. That could be true. It was in practice. I know that. I don't remember the description of that moment. I know he has not even talked about the injury to any press until this draft workout talk. He was very, 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 very private about the whole thing. This is kind of the first time that he's really talked about it at all. But yeah, you could be right. I just know for a fact it was in practice. Carrie says Cooper posted a link to that interview on Twitter/X earlier today for anyone interested. Yes, he did. Go ahead and find that on Twitter. It's probably other places too, but definitely on Twitter. Good to see that he is medically cleared after breaking his fibula in mid-November. Brandon says Cooper would have been on Heisman Award nominee if he'd come back. I agree, especially if they were able to throw him in on offense a little bit, but just his ability on defense and special teams alone, I think he would have been on all sorts of watch lists just for that. T. Hank says, I was at the game, played like we were winning. We did. It was incredible, being there and on the one hand, feeling so helpless and hopeless about the offense. So helpless and so hopeless about the offense, but at the same time being so proud that the defense was hanging in, because they did absolutely nothing offensively, obviously. But the defense, Michigan couldn't move the ball against them. They barely hit 200 total yards in the game, and Iowa gave up 10 in the first half, all set up by offensive mistakes, and gave up 0 in the second quarter, purely because of the defense and how well they played. Michigan, the national champions, the eventual national champions, could not move the ball in the Iowa defense, and it was so maddening just to sit there and watch that and to know that, as T. Hink just commented, if they had a top 100 offense, we win the game. I agree. If that team had a top 100, top 90 offense, if they had an offense that could have got them 300 yards in that game, I think they win. But we'll never know. I guess it's just one of those memories of the Brian Ferentz era that we can always cherish. All right, so I'm gonna throw the link to join the show in the chat right now if anybody wants to hop in. Otherwise, we are going to wrap up here pretty soon. Good to be with everybody again. I know it's been a while since I've been on, but always fun to come on and talk to everybody and hear people's thoughts. So hopefully we'll get to do a lot more of it. This year as the year progresses. Please share the show on social media. Every time we go live, even 5 or 10 of you sharing it on social media and bringing in a couple new viewers always helps. Corey works very, very hard at what he does to set up this platform. I'm very grateful to be a small part of it and to have access to it every once in a while. So please share the show out. I know we've got a lot of people that do watch every single show that have Facebook pages and Instagrams and all that kind of stuff. So it always helps when we throw up an Instagram post and people comment on it, repost on it, like it, share it. all of that good stuff. If you're interested in following us on social media, go ahead and look for @From the Hawkeye on Twitter and Instagram, and From the Hawkeye of the Storm on Facebook. That's where you can find us on social media. If you're looking for me personally, I am @Kyle Spence Golf on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube as well. So all three of those platforms, if anybody's interested in finding me, Kyle Spence Golf is the name for those pages. Went over this earlier, but very, very sad that Caitlyn Clark is leaving us. Going to be a very, very emotional night on that senior night, and especially those last 2 tournament games as well, where it will be do or die at that point for her career. Please like and subscribe as always. Support the show by signing up for a free Aura trial. Guys, we've promoted this a lot. It is very, very hard to convert people, but it does really, really help the show. If you head on over to Aura, www.aura.com/Hawkeyes, let them know that From the Hawkeye of the Storm on YouTube sent you. That's a big help to the show. One of the best ways to support what we do. All right, let's get to some of these last comments. Might have a couple golf comments to finish up, because we seem to have some people here that are interested in some of these golf stories. All right. T. Hink asks what my favorite course is. Well, I've got to say Finkbine. As far as the Iowa City area, I know I work there, so I'm a little bit biased, but I did play my high school golf there. It's definitely the best quality of course in Iowa City. I do like Riverside a lot. Riverside's about, or Blue Top Ridge, as a lot of people know it, is about 20 minutes south of Iowa City. Is also a very good one. My favorite courses in the world are in the great country of Northern Ireland, where my parents are from. So we've been over there several times to play golf. That is my absolute favorite place to play golf. Let's see here. Cyhawk Money says, what's my best score at Finkbine? My best score at Finkbine is 65. That's my low at Finkbine as of now. So I'll have plenty of chances to break that this year, but that's my low at the moment. Cyhawk Money also says, Ascent Nutrition Under the Kitchen are flooring experts. Let's go through that. We've got Iowa Smokehouse that promotes our Iowa Smokehouse on that bottom ticker that you can see there, sponsoring the show. Please use our code. It's a great way to support us. We've got apparel, that also a good way of supporting the channel. Let's see. Got a couple of these other ones. RTI Threads as well. Now that we're talking about Cooper DeJean, lots of other guys, Aaron Graves, Carson Shire, Zach Lutmer, and Aiden Hall all have merchandise at RTI Threads. Great way to support the show. Under the Kitchen, authentic Hawkeye player artwork. Visit their Facebook. Randy Engel doing great stuff down there. Iowa Floor Covering, located in Bondurant for all of your flooring needs. Did I hit them all? I think I hit them all. All right, guys, it's been a pleasure. It looks like we are not getting Coach Don back tonight. Very unfortunate, but I'm sure we'll see him back here soon as we get closer and closer to spring football and practice and all that kind of stuff. So we'll have Coach Don back on soon. But again, appreciate the opportunity to be with all of you as we talk Hawkeye football here in the offseason. Great to have everybody with us. We'll talk to you soon.